Discover the Our MedTech Lives podcast, where industry experts share their career stories, key achievements, and insights into overcoming challenges in the MedTech field. Hosted by Zilka Rima and Kash Ikram.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Our MedTech Lives. Today we are delighted to welcome Rupa Datta, who is an expert in commercial excellence and talent development. But Rupa Datta founded Portfolio People for people with portfolio careers, which is a term that was made popular by Charles Handy. But what are portfolio careers? So without further ado, welcome Rupa. And I'm going to ask you, Rupa, like the same question I ask you every time I see you for the last decade is, got a job yet?
Well, your timing is impeccable, Kash. And we planned to record this episode when I've literally just finished a contract. So you could say, no, I don't quite have a job right this second, but I did a week ago.
Okay.
And you could also argue, well, having a portfolio career means that you may never have a proper job, multiple things going on, but I guess I can explain what that means a little bit later.
It's incredible.
Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm the nicer one here. So let's get to know you a little better. Tell us something about yourself and about your background. So for those who do not know you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think for those of you who tuned in from the start may have already gathered that Kash and I have known each other for a few years.
Yeah.
And we met at business school. He's not changed one little bit. Maybe a little bit more grey. I don't know. I think you look exactly the same.
A little bit greater.
I suppose there's something to be said about the banter and the fun that can be had in conversations, right? I wouldn't be here now if talking to you guys, recording this podcast, I wouldn't be here now if, well, not only Kash and I met, more than 15 years ago, I feel like it is. 15 years ago, and about 6 months ago, a bunch of us from business school caught up, and I would say business school and that network is part of my portfolio, which led to a conversation about the podcast that you guys are doing. And I said, hang on a minute, technically I'm in MedTech at the moment, and yeah, let's get together and record.
Yes. You know, the fantastic thing is that people who do an MBA and are studying that typically want to, progress within the job that they have, or they want to switch their career into something else. But nobody says, let me do this and then have this variety of roles that I do. And some of them come and go. And the rest of us just thought, wow, this conceptually didn't register for a lot of us back then, right? And I think even back then it was somewhat unusual. So I just thought, how brave, right, to be going down that route, and how different compared to the rest of us. I think for some of us didn't even compute what it was. But yeah. And you've made a huge success. So what made you move away then from a traditional career path of joining a company, being there for a few years, just doing that role or working for that organization, to this portfolio career that you have today? Yeah.
Great question. So I suppose I can answer Silke's question better now. My formative career was in recruitment, to be specific, health and social care and education recruitment. And I had done that for coming on for 7 years. Decided I didn't necessarily want my boss's job or to go to a competitor for, a few £1,000s more as a base. One day I woke up and decided I was going to do an MBA, right? Not really sure why, but that's how we ended up meeting each other. Towards the end, when we do our dissertations or management challenges, is what we called it back then, I kind of used this concept or this idea as a feasibility study for, could this be a viable business? And the reality is that the research proved yes. The timing proved no, and I think a few people came to me during the pandemic and said, you know what, Roops, maybe you tried to go to market too early with it. I'd also say that there is a misconception that having a portfolio career means that you don't have a job and you're a freelancer and you're self-employed. And I think there are lots of people in gainful employment, in successful careers that have a portfolio, but perhaps don't know that they do, or are comfortable necessarily talking about it in those terms.
Right.
Help us clarify this a little bit, because we are now just using the word portfolio because your company is portfolio people. But what is a portfolio person and what is a portfolio career?
So if we go back to Charles Handy's original methodology and theory, we've moved away from industrial age where we have a job for life concept and throw up in the air a linear life where maybe the first 20 years or so, or the first quarter of your life, is in education. If you grow up in an environment where that is afforded to you, the next 50 years or the next half of your life is earning money, working, and perhaps family. And then later in life, that's when other interests and volunteering and service become a thing. Well, how about if we throw that all up in the air and see it as cyclical? We can and should be doing all of that, not necessarily directly at the same time, but my life at the moment, or in 2026, I'm trying to look at it in 6-week bursts and focus on some of those areas at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing, though, is how it all comes together, right? So understanding that it's splitting it into segments, but really how does it all interlink? And again, using the reference here, I wouldn't be sat here talking with you guys now if I hadn't met Cash 15 years ago and we hadn't kept in touch. And therefore that education part of my portfolio back then is still yielding opportunities and connections and conversations.
I get the concept when you mentioned earlier, when you are a freelancer, you have your own business. I still don't get it 100% when I have a job being employed. How can I then build a portfolio career?
Okay, so if we look at it in the context of MedTech and
Mm-hmm.
communication, so the last role I was in projects for a pathology services company, where specifically I was working in a laboratory environment. One of the things that became quite clear, both through the meetings I was in, and also just a senior operations manager one day saying to me, not even saying to me actually directly, throwaway conversation, I think some of my staff need to learn to do presentations better. And within a company, whether or not they have access to learning and development within, or whether or not a person, these are biomedical scientists that I'm referring to here, need to perhaps do something for further study or volunteering that may help them with further skills to progress their career, is where the portfolio comes in.
Okay. And then can you design a portfolio career, or does it just happen? How does it evolve?
Great question. I think it's both. There's the intentionality part of it. So would I say that I am proactively, continually designing my portfolio career? Absolutely. I think a lot of people, as I said earlier, probably already have one, but they don't necessarily compute it as that, or see motorbiking in the country every summer as a hobby rather than something that's possibly adding value in different ways.
Okay. Rupa, you told us that this portfolio career approach led you to your last MedTech project. How did this happen?
Yeah, I did. So two points to make here, I suppose. One is the how it happened, and the second point around the realization that there is a connection to a deeper portfolio. So if I go back to 2 years, I'd been doing a lot of freelance work in education, and the summer was quite quiet. So realised, maybe I need something a little bit more substantial, and a network that you build over time. I'd mentioned to a few friends and colleagues, I've got a bit of a gap. I'm open to doing something for the next six months or so. And it was actually at a friend's wedding over the summer period. Conversation has sparked an interest. A sister had also said to her, I'm looking for some help. And that reconnection was made. In addition, the person that was going to become my boss was also at, one of these Indian wedding receptions, Cash. So that
Well, if they last 5 days, you got to end up talking about a lot of stuff, right?
yeah, and I think it's a different way to look at networks and networking. But I think what resonated with me was I wasn't quite sure what I was walking into. Wasn't
Hmm.
sure what quite sure what I signed up to, and then once I was in the role, I'd realised, oh, actually, they they've said that this is what it's about, and I'm not from the healthcare field per se, but recognizing that I had skills from previous roles or previous parts of my portfolio, like facilities management, asset management, software implementation, and so on, as well as project management, which is what it ended up being, and the change element. It was all being brought together in this new role, and I hadn't fully computed that. Whereas if I'd have applied through normal means, it would have been a very different story. Some people get put off by doing so yeah, point number one, the network. Point number two, recognizing that you have skills that may not necessarily translate on a job description that can be applied later on from your portfolio.
But that's great. Rupa, you told us that this portfolio career approach led you to your last MedTech project, which was the first in MedTech, actually. How did that happen?
There's 2 points I'd like to make here. One is the how it happened, and the second being realizing just how much a portfolio helps when it comes to opportunities. So, how it happened was traditional networking that people wouldn't necessarily call networks. So, I'd had a significant gap in the summer of 24 after some freelance work in education.
Hmm.
I'd mentioned to, of course, a few contacts and friends, hey, if you hear of anything, let me know. And one of my best friends actually, her sister was getting married that summer. Her sister was also looking for some help when it came to the contract she was on, and so the connection was made. And true Indian wedding style, I also met the person that would become my boss during those, as Cash may have mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
5-day wedding events where you talk about lots of different things.
Yes. Yeah. Look,
I'm just
an
surprised that
Indian.
you talk about business at
Well,
weddings.
an Indian wedding is typically 3 to 5 days, right? It's
Okay.
not your simple wedding where you go there for an afternoon, you have some cucumber sandwiches and head off home, right? You can make small talk. But when you meet someone for the third day and it's a whole day, then
You
the
open a company
conversation gets
together.
a lot deeper. Yes, unless you're the groom, and then you don't have to say much. You just have to look pretty.
I could say something there, but I shan't.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
So, yeah, and I think the second point was once I was actually in said contract, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I wasn't sure what I'd actually signed up to. But when you realise that, of course, industries that you're not familiar with, so I'm not necessarily from healthcare or medtech, the language on the actual job description was very different to what I'd be used to. But when I realised that actually, no, hang on, this is project management, this is change management, and sector wise as well. So even within the company, the department I was affiliated to was more sort of facilities management and asset management, looking after these pieces of kit that are worth billions, as you guys will know. So yeah, all of that sort of stuff was transferable from a previous life.
So,
But it's good that your hiring manager appreciated these transferable skills, because we see more and more today that people want to hire a safe hire, right? With everything done before. So that's good to know.
how do you manage your finances, right? So, knowing how much you got coming in each month, right? If you work for a Johnson and Johnson, you know how much you got coming in each month, right? But in a portfolio career, how do you manage that?
Again, a great question. There's definitely been peaks and troughs for it for sure, and I'd say this is something that I've refocused on later. This is something that I'm spending more time focusing on. The last couple of years and moving forward. Perhaps as a result of the conversations we had over the MBA dinner, Cash. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are ways to ensure that you still give yourself a stable income or a consistent income, but I think it's more about knowing, from my perspective, what enough is for you, for
Hmm.
your day to day living. And then, like all of us, if we're fortunate enough to still have some cash left over for investments and thinking about the future, then that's the way forward.
Yeah.
I could go slightly deeper here and talk about a conversation that I just had yesterday where people trade in different kinds of exchanges. But no, it's a fair question and a really important one.
But I mean, I think you could always say yes to everything, right? Because you think, oh, there's another offer, and this topic maybe I like, or this is an attractive offer financially. So how do you decide to which project you say yes or which one you don't want to do?
Fantastic question and quite timely. Had a similar conversation with a couple of people yesterday. And like with anything, right? In reality, time is our most finite resource, not so much the money.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that we have to take ourselves on. So maybe 2 years ago, money wasn't as important to me as it was last year. It might be more important this year. And sometimes, when it comes to not even self-employment, it's also related to if the role you're talking about is a permanent role, right?
Right.
Is the overall compensation package worth it? So something that's, the salary might be a figure, but actually the overall compensation package with option 2 is better than option 1. Is this role going to make me burn out, or is this role going to afford me time with my family? And maybe actually making those decisions based on your overall portfolio is the lens that we need to see things through.
And how do you brand yourself? I mean, do you say, okay, I'm an expert in commercial excellence, for example, and then you can do roles either in series or in parallel that are commercial excellent roles that last for X amount of time? Is that how you go approach it, or is it a generalist, or is it a bit of both?
Great. Also great question. I think I've gone through the cycle of being a specialist to spending a lot of time as a generalist, and now I'm looking to maybe niche again when it comes to certain roles. I guess the label commercial excellence, if we're talking about a professional perspective, is I think my value is being able to connect the dots. So,
Right.
commercial excellence from a sales and marketing talking to each other, sales and customer success talking to each other, from a project perspective, from a change perspective. Rupa's real value is the change and engagement piece. So it does depend on the role, I think, but the real value is being able to connect the dots and asking good questions.
Interesting.
I'm trying another good question.
Okay.
I would like to spend one more minute on this MedTech project, because when we talked first, you told me that you experienced that scientists communicate differently. So for us, always being in MedTech, it's maybe a normal conversation, but I found this super interesting. So what was so different from you, and what do you think this could mean from us being in the field for so long?
So the context really was almost similar to what Cash referred to when it came to the MBA, right? A lot of people in whatever field we're in, we start off and become specialists in those fields, right? Engineers become good at being engineers, scientists become good at being scientists. But when it comes to getting a promotion or going into management or going into leadership, you need different skills. What got you there won't get you here. And the reference that I'd made to you, Silke, and what I'd noticed having spoken to that operational manager is they recognize themselves that scientists go into too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if they are looking to become a board member, or if they are looking to have their next promotion, really the person that they're presenting you just needs that 5-minute overview. They need the exec summary. And so the question back to you guys is, do we as salespeople actually just get used to jargon, or is it because we're talking to not the scientists anymore, not the medical professionals anymore? We're talking to people at a different level that we can alter the way we communicate.
Yeah. Well, it's very important when you're communicating with different people who have different interests is to clearly understand what is it that person is interested in, right? So let's take we're selling a huge piece of medical equipment to a hospital, right? If you're talking to the CFO, the surgeon, the nurse, the CEO, the sterilization department, they don't all want the same answer. They don't want just the one answer that you give to all of them. So you have to, create or tailor what you're talking about to the audience and their needs, right? That's the important thing, right? The CEO of the hospital has a very different need for that product than does the head of sterilization, for example, in a hospital, right? Or the environmental pollution person within the hospital, right? And very different to the doctor. So understanding the needs of the stakeholders is very important.
I think for me it was slightly different in the last years because I used to sell to private practices. So you sell to the owner of the practice, right? Who's all in one. Everything Cash just described was in one person. And I think you also help to shape the portfolio of the practice, especially in aesthetics. You need to decide whether you want to have this piece of or this therapy in your portfolio, while in a hospital it's quite clear, right, what you want to offer and which department you are in. Yeah, I think this is a completely different approach. You are more like a consultant for the entire business, more a business consultant than the product specialist, maybe. The product specialist comes in once the decision is made. But before, yeah, it's a broader discussion for me when I compare to jobs in the hospital environment.
But Roops, don't you ever wake up in the middle of the night, sit up in bed and go, oh my God, what am I doing? I need to go and apply for a job, right? And have my 9 to 5, right? Or are you way past that now?
Not at all. And I think, we can look at the portfolio from the perspective of, I'm going to take it a day at a time, or this week I'm going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Or we can see it from the annual view, the 2026 view. And I am genuinely like just taking this year in 6 weeks chunks, and you can call it an experiment. But you could even see the whole portfolio over a 10 or a 20-year period. A direct answer to your question, Cash, would be, having been sat around the table with you guys in December or November, whatever it was, and I'm like, hang on a minute, all of these guys are talking about retirement, and I'm like, apart from the fact that I was the youngest one there, I'll take that.
By far.
But yeah, is the financial element something that I personally need to focus more on, or is it actually just approaching life and career with a different lens?
I still think you're incredibly brave. How do people find you, right? So you're a specialist in X and you're a portfolio person. How does someone looking for someone find you?
Depends on what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and I'm pushing out enough content on the website itself. I mean, Silke has noticed my blog, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
A couple more blog posts that are in there that just need to come out and get published.
Okay.
So I think it depends on what the ask is. Have I recently been approached about speaking opportunities because of the content I've been put out? Work-wise or actual paid revenue generating stuff normally comes through referrals and conversations. But could we all do more when it comes to a personal brand perspective? Absolutely. And then there's just niching down a little bit more. We can have too much going on in the portfolio. A little free nugget for both of you. There should never be more than 4 things at any given time.
Okay.
We talked about your own portfolio career, but you also have a company called Portfolio People. So who should contact you looking for help, maybe?
I think it's, if anyone is listening to this and thinks, I am a little bit more interested in this concept, and yes, maybe I'd like to certainly just have an exploratory conversation to begin with about whether or not I do have a portfolio. But yeah, I'm sure you guys will share a link and drop a note in the comments or whatever. That would be the first step. But I think building out, whether it's being able to communicate or personal brand, something else, that sort of thing. That's the reason for people to get in touch. But realizing, I think the real value I add when it comes to helping people build a portfolio career is how it all connects together.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's clearly advantages, right, of having a portfolio career, right? In your mind, what are the advantages that you have? I've got some ideas jotted down here, but from your mind, what would you say are the advantages?
When things are working or in the peaks, I would say taking back control of your time is
Yeah.
the main step.
Yeah.
Autonomy, and to I think it was Silke's earlier point about making decisions to choose one thing over another.
Right. Right.
Whether that's because, okay, for the next few months, my focus is on family, or for the next few months, no, actually, I'm going to make hay, right?
Okay.
To
Yeah.
then take a month off. So, as an example, and this is normal contractor stuff rather than portfolio stuff, contract came to a natural end whilst there was discussions about extensions and a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally decided that I'm traveling for a lot of the next few weeks,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whilst the main purpose for that is rest and recuperation, yeah, some seeds have already been planted for new opportunities, different opportunities, exploring other things in the portfolio.
This all sounds super positive and it looks like it's for everyone. But do you think there are people where you would say, no, you should not go for a portfolio career? It's not for you.
Definitely, and I don't want to be too specific in terms of people that have said to me it's not for me or couldn't do it, and the sort of people that need a lot of structure to their day.
Hmm.
A portfolio career is probably not for them unless they can be self-motivated, know that, whether or not you need to work on lead generation, working on your own website, whatever it is. If you're the sort of person that, for whatever reason, it could be mental health, it could be physical health, needs a structure given to them, then a
Mm-hmm.
portfolio career is probably not for you.
Yeah. I think on the positive sides, you mentioned, I mean, obviously there's multiple income streams if you're doing multiple projects, right? That's good. But you mentioned earlier you walked into a role, you weren't really familiar with that business area, MedTech, for example, but it was an opportunity to develop new skills faster and then to bring skills that you'd learned at multiple different places. So, if you've been at one company for a decade in one department, you probably got a set of skills, but not very diversified, right? Whereas if you have a portfolio career and you've worked for 10 different companies in 5 years and done four different roles, which you feel creative about, that's a very fast skill development, wouldn't you say?
It is, and I think
Yeah.
if I were to challenge that somewhat, Cash, you can, going back to the point about having a portfolio career while still building a career within one company, it's whether or not that individual recognizes that the hobby that they have outside of work, let's call it on a football team for the sake of argument, they may be captain of that football team or they may be on the committee for that football team.
Yes.
Actually, are they leveraging those skills and bringing that back into the business to
Wow.
maneuver?
Well, wow, that's a completely different way of thinking about things.
I'm just wondering, I like all what you're saying. I'm just wondering how you implement this in an interview situation, because normally these are not questions you get asked, right? So you need to find a proactive way to share your portfolio approach.
Yeah, I'm going to refer to a friend who I gave some career advice to when she was changing careers from being in a local authority setting. I can't remember the exact role she was in. To moving into project management, and at the time, I think she was still studying for a project management course, and had started doing some freelance work with the business that we were both in. And most traditional ways of approaching a CV, the role where she had the most obvious event and project management experience for years, we're talking about 10 or 20 years, was in a volunteer capacity. That went straight up to the top of the CV.
Right.
Right? That's the first thing that the person would see or the interview would see. Sure, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are a lot of business out there that will be like, well, that was volunteering. It's not the same thing. I don't know if you can coordinate some pretty sizable events successfully over many years. That's good project management right there.
Exactly. And as you're working in these different companies on different projects, do you ever get lonely?
Cash, I think you know me well enough to know that that's never going to be the case. In
Okay.
fact, quite the contrary. Sometimes I need to go and hide somewhere so that I don't need to talk to people. But a very fair question. I think again, in my heyday, in my peak, I was measuring my success by how many Christmas parties I got invited to, right? Not much anymore, right? But a fair point for some people.
What did you do at these parties that they don't get invited back anymore?
Good point, well made,
Yeah,
actually. Yeah,
I could tell you what I did, but not online.
not online, exactly. But yeah, another fair point. Some people need, in fact, and someone we both know is referring to that
Yeah,
as well, right? That that there is something about being an employed situation in that kind of environment that gives you its own that gives one its own community.
yeah.
What I felt was I had my own company for some years as well, and the biggest difference for me was that everyone you talked to was a client. So you didn't have colleagues, and you talk differently to colleagues than to clients. Is this something you are experiencing?
I would say a lot of my colleagues, stroke clients, eventually ended up being friends.
Okay.
Right. So when push comes to shove, we're all human beings and we connect on that level. Perhaps in some countries and some cultures, there's more of a barrier when you have
Mhm.
these different personas. But no, I wouldn't say I've personally experienced that in a negative way.
And also, there's certain aspects that you would have to deal with that as an employed person you don't. So things like I'm thinking tax, contracts, benefits, retirement plan. How do you manage those things, or how should you think about those things?
Again, probably something that will vary from country to country. I'm sure there's lots of different people from different parts of the world watching this, uh, and something that I've personally only really started to think about more recently. But yeah, the most recent contract I was in, that was the equivalent of a full time contract role rather than as a self employed mechanism. The way I see it in very layman's terms is these are different types of payment mechanism. And yes, it gets more complicated if you have to do your own taxes, or one stream of income is coming through this mechanism and another one's coming through this mechanism. Unfortunately, you possibly need to invest in some help there,
Hmm.
or get very good at admin yourself. So yes.
I think you need a tax advisor for a portfolio career because you have different income streams. And at least in Switzerland, I would recommend to have a tax advisor.
Thanks for that disclaimer, Silke. I think that's a smart move.
But again, it's more skill development. It's understanding and within your country how these things work and how, because I mean, in some temp contracts, holiday pay and pension and is in there, even though it's a temp contract, right? And others, no, they expect you to deal with that yourself, right? And you hold that responsibility, and that's something that you should definitely be thinking about. Wow.
And with that, I mean, if I just may offer one more point
Mm.
on that, recent experiences, this is where one needs to make a decision as to, is that overall package worth it? And a
Yes.
recent offer on paper was actually very good had
Hmm.
it been an employed contract. The fact that it wasn't meant that I had to renegotiate all the terms, and it didn't work itself out.
Right. Right.
Rupa, you mentioned several times that you get all these opportunities through your network. So you are a networking enthusiast. I think a lot of people are afraid of networking. And what we see is they start networking when they lost their jobs, right? Then they start reconnecting. So, how do you think we should network in an effective way?
I think you've answered your own question there, and it's by not starting when you have an actual need, because it's a little bit like dating.
Mhm.
People know when cash is attention
Dating.
turns up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the other party or other parties can sense desperation, and I would argue that networking, or the act of having a network, could be one part of one's portfolio. Again, a service that I offer through Portfolio People, the Network Buddy, a program. And people don't necessarily, certainly in Britain, people don't necessarily like to think about it that, your friends are your network as well. Family members are a network. So you may not want to think about, oh, I'm going to a 5-year-old's birthday party. I might meet someone there, or I'm going to have a conversation that's going to add value. And I remember one 10 years ago. I was like, oh, I'm not going to take my business cards with me. It's just going to be full of police officers and teachers. and how wrong I was, right?
And you are organizing net walks. What is this?
Again, maybe combining more than one part of the portfolio. Not everything needs to revolve around alcohol, and a lot of networking events can be evening based. Cash's eyes just gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
Yes.
alcohol.
You're mentioning all the top stuff: dating, alcohol, parties. I love this conversation. Keep going.
The network being networking or having conversations with people while walking allows it to be a little bit free flow. The premise, of course, normally starts with a portfolio career, and you're not wrong. A lot of people sign up if they've just been made redundant or are in between roles. My argument would be, hey, it's roughly once a month. Just come along. You don't know who you're going to meet, and have a conversation.
So where is this?
Normally,
Where can people walk with you?
normally within London, and I try to advertise the
Okay.
location once a month, one of the London parks or the river or that sort of thing.
Funny. I like that idea.
Fantastic. So, a little bit in summary. So I've made some notes. So I see the advantages of what you do is that you have this diversified income, flexibility. I know, for example, you do a lot of Toastmaster stuff, so you have the time to develop that. You've been doing that for years. You build up a broad network, fast learning curve on skills. You have lots of autonomy. You reduce the dependency on just one employer, right? Which I think is fascinating and super interesting. And you can decide when you work and when you don't want to work. So I love that part, right? Pitfalls maybe would be, lack of structure, ability to scale, being on your own sometimes, or moving. Some people like to be with a group of people for multiple years. You won't be having that. You got to have strong discipline, right? But then that not being with the same people all the time could actually be a plus, right? The people you work with, you probably spend more time with them than you do with your family half the time, right? So if you're not happy with them, that's a tough situation to be in. So there's lots of stuff there in terms of pros and cons of this approach. And I think it's fascinating and extremely interesting, especially in the modern work post-COVID world is becoming very popular, right? And that's why we were interested to have you on and share your insights. So the work question I'm going to ask you now is kind of what are the three things that you know now you'd known then?
Regardless of what we've just discussed, and all of the jokes aside, money is still very important, and anyone that says otherwise is lying, right? To what extent and how much might vary from person to person, but it is still very important. There is no single career path. If the example I always give in a portfolio context is pre-2004, Meta, LinkedIn, all of these kind of platforms didn't exist.
Yeah.
Marketing landscape changed, and technology and other things are moving so fast now, where there are jobs today that weren't around when we were younger, right?
Yes.
So there is no one career path, and the more open you can be, maybe the more opportunities you'll have. And the final one, Cash, is something that's up until 2 minutes ago I hadn't thought about. But the point about not being
I'm scared now.
Yeah.
not being with the same people all the time. I think this is a beautiful example of, you and Silke have known each other 20 years. You have known each other 15 years.
Yeah.
Relationships start in all sorts of places and continue and transcend over time. And we need to take the long view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're incredibly impressive. We even thought that when we first met. You're taking some super brave decisions in your career, in your life. And I encourage everyone to check you out on LinkedIn, read your blog, and reach out for advice if people are thinking of portfolio career. Sounds interesting. It's something I want to explore.
I think you're almost ready.
Maybe we always had it, right? Having a podcast, having a job, but we didn't realize that we had one.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's become popular with these books like the 4-hour working week and stuff like that. But how do you take that from a concept to living it in reality? Rupa, you're a living example of that and have been long before it became popular.
Walking, talking portfolio person. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for today and sharing your time, your experiences, and your knowledge.
Thank you for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into our MedTech Lives. You have been listening to Zilka Rima and Kash Ikran. We're committed to bringing you insights and stories that inspire and inform the medical community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network.